Anyways, any more questions, just ask me after Mass. First Sunday in Lent, always devoted to the temptation of Jesus, whether it's Matthew, Mark, or Luke. This year we get Mark's version, which is the shortest of versions. In fact, Mark's temptation narrative doesn't even give us those three temptations that we hear in Matthew and Luke's gospel. It just says that Jesus is out in the desert, and Jesus is tempted by Satan, and that's it. Okay. So I guess the good news is short gospel, short homily, right? Okay, all right? So put that in the survey, all right? Okay? So, but let's break this down, because there is one line I do want to reflect on. But since it's short, let me give you some of these lines here. The first is that the Spirit drove Jesus out into the desert. That's what I really want to preach on today. Okay, so I'm going to leave that aside for 1 second and go on to the next two sentences here. He remained in the desert for 40 days. Okay? For those that are very in tune or interested in Scripture, 40 days in the desert, the first thing that you would think of is the book of Exodus. Okay? The Israelites wandered in the desert for 40 years. Okay? And what was happening while they were in the desert for 40 years? Constantly being tempted. Now, unfortunately for them, they usually failed in their temptations. The most famous one is probably the golden calf, right? We know that from the Ten Commandments movie. The golden calf, that's the most infamous one I think we all know, but there's other instances where they're tempted, they grumble against God, they fall into idolatry. They failed miserably in the desert. It wasn't a good period for them. Jesus, likewise, is in the desert 40 days, tempted by Satan, but as we know the story, he does pretty well for himself, okay? And then we're told, and now this is only in Mark's version here, Matthew and Luke doesn't mention this, that he's among the wild beasts. What's that all about? Why would Mark mention that? Well, you go back to the story of Adam, and Adam is what? Adam is in charge of all creation, including the animal kingdom. And before the sin of Adam, there was a harmony between Adam and really all of nature, the plants, the animals. There's a synchronization, they're together. They work together. Then after the sin, what happens? Well, that togetherness, now there's opposition, right? That's why some of us are afraid of snakes and spiders and all that stuff, right? And wild beasts can attack us. So the idea is that Jesus is in the chaos, okay, of nature. But again, he's going to overcome it. And we know that because the very last line says what? That the angels ministered to him. Now, we don't get this in Scripture. This is more of a Jewish oral tradition. But it was also believed that in the Adam and Eve account that the angels were assisting Adam and Eve in creation. Okay, not so much in Genesis, but from sources outside of Scripture that Mark's audience would have been familiar with. Okay, and so the angels are helping Jesus in this 40 days of fasting and prayer and in the desert. But it still begs the question, the very first line. The Spirit, the same Spirit that in the previous passage, the baptism of Jesus, the Spirit descends upon him with the voice of God the Father saying, "This is my beloved Son with whom I am well pleased." That same Spirit that descends upon Jesus in the baptism, and now in the very next passage, today's gospel, leads him out to the desert for the purpose of being tempted by Satan. That's the reason why the Spirit takes Jesus out there. Do you have a problem with that? Because sometimes we do. We question, we doubt, we get upset when temptations come into our life. In fact, sometimes we even bring those temptations in the confessional. And we say, well, I had thoughts of anger. Well, it's not necessarily a sin. It just could be tempted. And so it begs the question, well, why did the Spirit lead Jesus out to the desert to be tempted? Why does God allow temptations in our life? And so to explain that, let's use an analogy of nature. I just learned this week. What do trees know? Trees need things to grow, right? And the things I always thought trees needed was what? Sunlight and water. There's a third thing that they need. They need wind. Why do they need wind? The wind helps the trees to grow up straight. What do the winds do? The wind provides resistance to the tree. And in the resistance, the tree develops what's called, I just forgot the name of it. Oh my goodness. A certain type of wood, resistance wood. Okay, that's what it's called. It's a different type of wood that grows on the tree that's actually chemically different than the actual tree itself. It's like muscles. This wood develops for the purpose of the tree being able to grow up straight. If it didn't have wind, it wouldn't develop this resistance wood and the tree would fall down. But it's the resistance that helps the tree to grow. And so it also needs wind. And I think it's the same thing along with our muscles. Okay? When we work out, okay, what happens? We stretch out those muscles, and in the stretching out, in the resistance that we apply to the muscles grow and they get stronger. Okay? Our bodies are an analogy for the spirit. Our bodies are a window into this invisible spiritual life. Yeah, the spirit is invisible, but the body gives us signs of what happens to us spiritually. The temptations that God allows to happen in our lives provides resistance to our spiritual lives. But what happens is that when the temptations come, we get scared, we get upset, we get frustrated, and then we often, from that condition, fall into the sin. And then we question why God is allowing this to happen. He's adding resistance and strength to our faith. That's why temptations happen. And Jesus, in his humanity, is doing the exact same thing. In his humanity, he's building resistance. Because as the Gospel of Luke tells us, he's not only tempted by Satan in the desert, but throughout his whole ministry. And notice that in the temptations, again, nothing to be afraid of, but the temptations also happen usually when we're at our worst. So notice again, the temptation account of Jesus happens after the 40 days, when he's weak. Likewise, when we're hungry, and we're tired, and we're stressed, and we're angry, and frustrated, when we're depressed, when we're lonely, that's when the temptations increase. They always happen when we're not feeling our best, but often at our worst. That's when the evil one comes. That's when the thoughts come in. But they're just thoughts. Nothing to be afraid of. The Spirit will give you the grace to persevere. And when you fall, you have what? You have the divine mercy of God. Our Lord is with us throughout the whole process. But when you're being tempted to sin, no, it's probably because you're actually doing something right. You know, there's something that you're doing well that the evil one's trying to get you off course. Don't be afraid of it. Rely on the strength of God. You can't overcome temptations on your own effort. It's always part of the life of grace. This is why prayer and fasting, this is why the sacraments, these are all things given to us to help us in our temptation. God is with you always. And he allows the temptations in order to build up your strength. Don't be afraid. When they come, acknowledge for what it is, and then through really the grace of Jesus Christ, set it aside, rebuke it. Because it's the power of Christ that will get you through it. It's the power of Christ that's going to increase your faith through those temptations. May God bless you.